Hi, my name is Josh Goldsmith, and today in this video I'd like to tell you a little bit about artificial intelligence for interpreters. But first, who am I? Well, I'm a practicing conference interpreter and a total tech geek. No matter what the newest tech is, I'm always out there exploring it. And I actually do this through Tech Forward, a company I run, which is all about empowering translators and interpreters to keep up with the most cutting-edge developments for our profession. So, today we'll be talking about artificial intelligence. And to kick things off, I want to share a concern that many colleagues have shared with me. They come to me and they say, Josh, are the robots going to take our jobs? Well, I have to tell you, I've been working with tech for a long time. I've seen more and more tech uptake over the years, and the robots aren't taking our jobs. They're just helping us to do our work better, to use terminology more accurately, to make sure we're fully covering the message that our speakers want to convey. And I think that artificial intelligence can also help us to do that. Now, right now, ChatGPT is taking the world by storm. And I want to say that right now, as we're recording this video in April 2023, artificial intelligence as we know it has really only been a thing for about 6 months. So who knows what things will look like 6 months from now or 6 years from now. All I can do right now is share with you where things stand at the moment, some of the ways that I've been using artificial intelligence in my work, and offer some suggestions and ideas for the future. So first of all, I think that AI basically can be used in two different ways. First of all, we can use artificial intelligence when we're working with documents that we've already received, either materials that were sent by our clients or materials that we go out and find when we're preparing for an assignment. So that actually can be way more than just the documents you get. You can go out and find a video of the person who you're going to be interpreting speaking, and then you can use AI to help you analyze it and pull out the key ideas. You can go out and find PDFs and articles written by professors, for example, and all sorts of materials. That's the first way that we can use AI. The second way that we can use AI is when we don't actually have any materials, when we're starting with a blank slate. So you can use AI tools to go out and say, well, I want to do some brainstorming around whatever the topic of your meeting or assignment is, and then you can pull out potentially lists of terms and acronyms and ideas and so on. And I'm going to show you plenty of examples in this video of how we can actually do this. Now, I also want to tell you that there are two key things we need to bear in mind when we're using AI. First of all, everyone talks about ChatGPT, but I don't think ChatGPT is the best tool for us. And I'll tell you why at the end of the video. And secondly, we really need to bear in mind confidentiality for any types of confidential materials that we might be working with. And I'll also touch on this at the end of our video. But let's dive in and explore these two different ways that we can use artificial intelligence to help us to prepare. All right, our first option, starting with texts or any other type of materials. That can be PDFs, videos, whatever you might have. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to import these documents into a tool and then use artificial intelligence features built into that tool to explore the materials that we have. Now, I don't recommend using ChatGPT for this because there's an awful lot of cutting and pasting, and also ChatGPT really only works with text. Instead, I'm going to recommend a tool that I really like called Readwise Reader, which allows us to import not just text, but also PDFs, an article maybe by an academic, and videos, and work with those as well. So let's take a look at how this works. I've imported a publicly available document from a meeting I recently interpreted at the European Parliament into Readwise Reader. Once I've done so, I can use what's called the Ghost Reader, the artificial intelligence built into Readwise Reader, to start to analyze the text. I invoke the Ghost Reader, and first I'll summarize the document to see what it's about in general. And you can see that AI has generated a summary of this document, telling me what the resolution is about and some key points. It looks like it's interesting for me to continue exploring it. I also see some key terms like own resources, sustainable financing, repayment of funds, and the EU recovery plan, just from this one operation. As we read through the document, we might find some concepts that are a bit difficult to understand. I can simply highlight them to select them, invoke the Ghost Reader, and then ask it to either simplify or summarize that paragraph. We'll try summarize. And you can see now GPT has added a note, and we can see the summary in slightly simpler language that may help us to better understand this. We can also summarize in other ways. So if I select a paragraph and invoke the Ghost Reader, I can, for example, try TLDR, too long don't read, or haiku, or emojify. Let's just try one of them. And here we can see a very simple explanation of this paragraph. The haiku option is also fun. You can see it's actually a very concise and helpful way of understanding that paragraph. If we come across a term we're not sure about, we can highlight it, invoke the Ghost Reader, and then we can use one of the various definition or lookup functions available. So define is a dictionary lookup with some emojis. The encyclopedia lookup tells you the kind of information you'd tend to find in an external encyclopedia like Wikipedia. And the term lookup is really interesting because it provides document-specific context to understand what this term means in this document. So we can see that in this document, fiscal equivalency refers to the idea that so on and so forth. As you saw, it's also possible to translate the term or look it up in other places, or even turn it into emojis if you're a visual learner. The third way I like to use AI to understand documents, and when I say documents, I also include videos, PDFs, and any other type of materials I've imported in here, is with the option to invoke the ghostwriter and then ask the document a question. For example, according to the document, what are 10 key ways the EU can use its own resources? And you can see I now have a 10-point list of key topics from this document, and I can start to pull out useful terminology from here too. Rebates, correction, VAT-based own resources, EU budget, fines, fees, financial transaction tax, common corporate tax base, ETS, the emissions trading system, CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and so on. Now there are lots of other ways that you can ask the document a question. Given our time limitations, I'll just tell you about one other, which is to ask it for terminology. You could say, what are 20 key terms in the document? But I find it's more useful to be more specific. So what are 20 financial terms in the document would be more specific, and what are 20 multi-word financial terms in the document is going to get me some really good results. It takes a moment to process, and here we are. 20 useful terms related to exactly what I asked about, pulled from a document in no time flat. Before we move on to looking at the second tool I recommend for using artificial intelligence for preparation, let me just share two quick thoughts. First of all, artificial intelligence is trying to be an all-in-one tool. It's trying to answer any questions you might ask it, but it may not actually be the best tool for each project, for each type of preparation. For example, for terminology extraction, well, AI is going to come up with some terms, but they might not be as good as the ones that you would find when working with a tool that's specifically designed for terminology extraction. My favorite is Sketch Engine. The second thing that I want to say is that AI will come up with results that aren't always right. So you need to go through and check those results. As we saw, if you ask AI to give you 20 terms or 20 acronyms from a document, it's going to give you 20. But the results may not actually come from that document. So cross-reference. Check to make sure what it's telling you is correct. Go out and look at other sources and make sure that the information that you're using as a starting point for your preparation and for your interpretation is actually correct. The second way that we can use artificial intelligence is when we're starting from a blank slate. We basically give the AI a keyword and a set of instructions and ask it to go out and do some research for us. Now, here too, I don't recommend ChatGPT. There are a few different reasons. First of all, if you're trying to use the free version, it can be difficult to actually access it, and then you might have to pay for the paid version, which is more expensive than the tool I actually recommend. Secondly, the formatting isn't all that great, but most importantly, the key issue is confidentiality. Any information you give to ChatGPT will be used to further develop the models, the AI models behind it. Now, there's a way to actually tap into these models without sharing your information with ChatGPT. And that's by using what's called an API. We don't really need to go into what that is today. The point is that the tool I'm about to recommend uses that, and all of this information is confidential. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to say, which is that at least at the time of recording, we need to bear in mind that ChatGPT and the models behind it are trained on information that only dates to late 2021. So anything that you're trying to research that's from a time after that, well, you may not come up with anything. Just bear that in mind. So now let's take a look at my favorite AI-based tool for starting from a blank slate, and that's Notion AI. As I was reading through the document I received for this assignment, I realized that it might be helpful to learn more about Next Generation EU. So we're going to use the artificial intelligence built into Notion to explore this topic more. First, I'll press the space button to invoke the AI, and I'll simply ask it, what is Next Generation EU? It gives me a little bit of information, and if I'd like to have some more information, I can click Make Longer. I'd like to know some basic ideas about this program. So I can say, what are 10 key ideas related to Next Generation EU? And you can see I'm just using natural language, and I can do this in English or any other language. That's a good starting point, but now I'd like to learn more about different acronyms related to this subject. So I can invoke the AI and ask it, what are 20 acronyms related to Next Generation EU? A really helpful list, but it's hard for me to read it like that, so I might just ask the AI to present this as a two-column table. That's much easier for me to read. If I'd like some examples of how these terms are used in context so that I actually know how I could use them when interpreting, I can ask the AI to add a new column to the table with some examples in use. Now let's say I want to come up with a list of financial terminology related to Next Generation EU. I'll invoke the AI and ask it to give me a list of 20 financial terms related to Next Generation EU. Here too, I find it's helpful to ask for multi-word terms. Now some of these overlap with what I had in the previous list, but some of them are different. And now what everyone is always interested in, translating this glossary. I asked AI to create a two-column table with these English terms and the Spanish translations of these terms. You can see it did so very quickly. If I want to add a third language to this glossary, I can just ask it to add French as well. Something very important, make sure to review these results. They might not all be correct because you've asked it to give you a translation. It's going to give you a translation, but it may not necessarily be exactly what is used in the right context. For example, the Recovery and Resilience Facility is actually called the Mecanismo de Recuperación y Resiliencia, not the facilidad. So I'll have to check these terms, but it does save me a lot of time in putting together my glossaries. To wrap up this video, I'd like to leave you with a few concluding thoughts. First of all, confidentiality. I've said it before, but I cannot say it enough. Anytime you put anything online in the cloud, there are confidentiality issues to bear in mind. And this isn't only about AI, it's also about email and Dropbox and all sorts of ways that your clients send you information. I'm not going to speak about this at length. I've got a whole blog post where you can explore more about this, see how each and every tool is handling confidentiality. The link is below. Second, I wanted to reiterate, AI is a tool. You are the human with the brain. Use your brain. AI can help to save you some time, to speed up your research, to come up with some ideas you might not have come up with, or some great collocations, for example, but it cannot replace the human. If you take the glossary that AI generates for you in 1 minute and try to use it for an assignment, you'll probably say things that aren't correct. And that simply ain't professional. So instead of that, always check the results that you get, cross-reference them against the documents you receive from clients, make sure they're right, and then use this again as a starting point for your work. So obviously I could speak about AI for a long time, but I hope I've given you a good idea of some of the ways that you can work with it. If you'd like to learn more, I actually have a whole course about this called Automatic Glossaries with Artificial Intelligence. You can check it out below, and I'll walk you through every step of how you work with these tools. So I really enjoyed sharing some thoughts with you about artificial intelligence, where things stand right now, what the future might hold, and how we can use these tools in our work. And I look forward to hearing from you more about how you're using them and to continuing to explore what AI holds.